Hi, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about the sanctions that the West just sent Russia's way. We'll talk about what exactly these sanctions mean to Russia, how Russia may combat these sanctions, and finally I'll give my opinion on how effective these sanctions might be in ending the war. The first sanction we'll discuss is SWIFT. The United States and Europe managed to have Russia removed from this society known as SWIFT. This SWIFT system is used in international transactions when there's two different currencies. So barring Russia from SWIFT essentially cut off Russia from being able to deal in international transactions. This is key because this makes importing or exporting products virtually impossible or very difficult. Second, the US and Europe have banded together to freeze the central bank of Russia's foreign currency reserves held abroad. The Russian central bank holds roughly 600 billion in currency reserves, of which about half of it is held abroad. Now this 300 billion is now frozen. Putin is not going to be happy about this one, and I don't think he really saw this coming. For years, the Russian central bank had been building up their currency reserves in the event that they would get hit with large sanctions. This strategy has been coined Fortress Russia, and with these sanctions, it essentially wiped that one out. And this is important because as the ruble's falling, the Russian central bank would have had the power to release some of these reserves to help save the value of the ruble. But now they don't have that power anymore. And third, they're freezing foreign assets that are held by the Russian oligarchs. They're trying to get to those that are closest to Putin himself. And they're even seizing assets like private jets and yachts. And a fourth sanction was stopping the commencement of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which at one point seemed very important. But now, considering that Russia can't even deal in international transactions, how would they get paid even if they could deliver the energy to Europe? And people are even getting personal with these sanctions. You've even seen liquor stores in the United States refusing to sell Russian vodka to customers. And considering now that the Europeans have closed off their airspace, it's like Russia is sitting on their own island Russia, totally isolated from the rest of the world. And these sanctions have had an immediate impact on the Russian economy. We've seen Russian stock prices come crashing down, and the ruble itself has dropped 28% in value. And the immediate Russian response to stave off any further damage to the ruble was they have doubled their interest rates, and they've also banned the sale of securities by any foreigners to help maintain the value of the ruble. Let's preface this by saying that Russia is no stranger to sanctions. And there's been claims that the previous sanctions have cost the Russian economy hundreds of billions of dollars. And now these sanctions are on a whole new level. First, it's important to consider Russian imports. Russia imports roughly $250 billion worth of goods every year. And as you can see from this graph, that $250 billion is pretty evenly distributed between a numerous set of categories. So now considering that Russia has been essentially cut off from international trade, or that it's been made very difficult, a lot of these imports will no longer be there. So Russia will try to boost internal production to make up for as much as possible for the loss of what will no longer be imported. However, Russia will not be able to produce everything for themselves, so they will have to look to a new set of trading partners. Prior to these sanctions, roughly 45% of Russian imports came from either the UK, the US, or the European Union. So they'll have to look to different partners, perhaps China, Kazakhstan, or maybe even sanction buddy Iran, or other countries like this to help meet that shortage of imports. Not only will they need to find new partners, but they'll also have to find a way to pay them. And that leads to the third measure that the Russians will probably take, and to find an alternative to SWIFT so they can continue transacting internationally and be able to trade with these partners like China. And fourth, as the ruble continues to crumble, we may see Russians trade their money and their savings for cryptocurrency, something that's not regulated, in order to preserve their wealth. Now, let's talk about what really matters. How effective will these sanctions be in potentially ending the war? As Putin was invading Ukraine, I didn't think that there would be any types of sanctions that the West could levy on Russia that could potentially stop the war. But now, after seeing what the West has implemented, I'm kind of changing stances on that. It's unfortunate because the real losers of these sanctions that are levied from the West will be the Russian people themselves, many who had no control over this or who may not even want a war in the first place. If these sanctions continue, the ruble will continue to plummet. And considering that Russia has been cut off from international trade, they will soon start to see shortages across the economy, which will lead to rising prices. Now, coupled with the already rising interest rates and the falling ruble, this will deteriorate the Russian economy. In a 2016 study, it showed that roughly 80% of Russians live paycheck to paycheck. That means that a large portion of the population is going to be hit hard by these sanctions. They'll be forced to choose on what goods they buy and what they'll have to sacrifice. Now, economic fallout and financial challenges can be sad and a devastating issue, but really this does not pale into comparison on what the Ukrainians are going through right now. Nevertheless, this just goes to show how everyone that's involved in this war loses on both sides. Now let's shift the conversation from the general Russian population to the oligarchs. Now, these sanctions are directed to those who are closest to Vladimir Putin himself and those who are next most powerful in Russia. Putin recently called in 30 oligarchs to have them pledge their support for him. 2 oligarchs have already come out and spoken out against the war. Now, Putin knows how important these oligarchs are because if he loses their support as a whole, the floor will just fall out underneath him because he needs them on his side. However, many of these oligarchs fear speaking up against Putin, so he'll take brave beings to actually speak up against him. But if we start seeing more, the momentum could follow, and then they could all turn against him. However, this could be wishful thinking. We'll see how aligned the oligarchs are as these sanctions really start to burn. Now, I'll give you my forecast on how I see these sanctions playing out in the Russian economy, starting with the short term and then going to the long term. In the immediate term, we've already seen this. We've just seen fear enter the market, which has caused the Russian stock market to collapse and the ruble to come crashing down in value. From the medium-term perspective is where we'll start to see the macroeconomic impact from the lack of international trading and potential shortages, which will start having an impact on the day-to-day lives of Russians. And from the long-term perspective, it's my opinion that if these sanctions continue, it will really deteriorate the Russian economy. And this has the potential to break the will of the Russian people, which could end up leading to a revolution or a revolt, or for more people to join in the Navalny corner and protest and try to overthrow the current system in place. However, it could also go the other way too, as many of the Russian media is leading it to believe that the Americans and the Europeans are directing this attack on Russians themselves, and that it's not just a response to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Overall, these sanctions are serious and unprecedented at the scale and the speed of which they were implemented. And my heart goes out to all those that have been impacted by this terrible event in Ukraine, in Russia, and around the world. It's so sad that the aggression of one man can have such a negative impact and destroy the lives of millions.